Friends and followers, thank you for coming back to our part 3 of our gluten-free pizza crust demo this week. My name is Annie from MP, Mindful Palate Movement Practitioner, Milwaukee Proud. I'm grateful to have you back in my home kitchen, and I'd like to thank the Milwaukee Rec Department for helping to make these classes possible. So I'm glad that we can stay connected. You can possibly learn some new skills while you are in your homes. Maybe you're finding yourself with more time to cook, more time to be intentional in your kitchen, more time to look at what ingredients you have and use some of those up. So as you have known, I've been kind of crossing into different classes that I've taught over the last month now. So we will have more of that today. I'll refer to other classes that I've had. All of the live classes that I have taught in the last month or however long we've been doing this are now archived on my MP Facebook page. And so you can find those there. I took some time in the last couple of days to put titles on those and dates. So hopefully you can find those more easily if you are searching. That goes for my yoga classes as well. So check those out. A couple of housekeeping tips before we begin. I've had some technical difficulties in the last couple of weeks where the video would sort of spontaneously cut out. So if that happens, know that I will get back on as soon as I can. So it may take me to actually ending the video and then coming back on, and then we'll piece those together. So I apologize in advance if something like that happens. Actually, I think yesterday, once I mentioned that, then we didn't end up having any issues, but you never know. Murphy's Law. So that's the first piece. And then the other piece is that all of these recipes that I have shared with you this week, I will post on my page by the end of Friday. So I've been trying to keep those fairly organized, again, so that you can find them most easily. So if you go to my events on my MP Facebook page and you look under events, and then since it's past, it would be under past events. So it's sort of dimmed there, but you should still be able to click on it, I believe. Nobody's told me that they have had any trouble finding the recipes from past events. So anyway, I've been posting them there so that you know, oh, this was from the preserves class, this was from the knife skills class. There wouldn't be any recipes from knife skills, but you get my point, is that I'm trying to keep them organized within each class. And I'll also post some pictures of the beautiful pizzas that we made already this week. I'm slowly chipping away at eating those. I've had 2 whole pizzas in my possession this week, and I've been eating pizza for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not quite, but it's okay because they've been some good ones, some interesting combinations of toppings, which we will continue with today. So on Monday we made our gluten-free grain crust. It had a sorghum flour base with some different starches to hold the shape and the texture of it. Yesterday we made an almond flour crust. So a little bit different texture, a little sweeter, just a hair on the sweet side. So you could try ingredients that lend themselves to something a little bit sweeter. And then today we're making a cauliflower crust. So if you haven't heard of a cauliflower crust, you might be thinking, why in the world would we do that? So as gluten-free products and offerings have evolved in the last, let's say, 15 years, there have been different ingredients that have been used to try to make something look the same as the original. With cauliflower, it has, if you stretch your palate, it definitely has that underlying cauliflower flavor. So if you really don't care for cauliflower, you might not enjoy this, but you also might be surprised. So anyway, just know that with that cauliflower crust, the idea is to create something that has still kind of that white, off-white color that looks like a pizza crust. And you may be surprised at the texture when you make this. I would say when you taste this today, but unfortunately you won't be able to taste what I'm creating. So I'm really wishing that I could share with you. That is one of the things I look forward to most when we get to reunite in live classes, in-person live classes, is that you get to taste what you're making or what I'm making. So that'll be something to look forward to. All right, so this grain-free cauliflower crust. As I did in past days, I'll read you the recipe first. We should have plenty of time, so I'll read you the recipe first. You can jot it down, and then I'll go back step by step and dig into some of those bits and pieces. So this technically could serve 2 to 4. So if you remember yesterday with that almond crust, I had actually doubled it, and it still ended up being a fairly small pizza. So I'm not remembering if this one, it's been a while since I've made this. I'm not remembering if this one is kind of the same. So I also mentioned yesterday with these 3 different pizza crusts, I often teach these as one class. So the last time I taught these classes, this class, which was probably the last time I made this cauliflower crust, was at the Milwaukee Public Market last summer maybe, or spring. So it's been a little bit, maybe it was in the fall. I don't know. It's been several months at least. And so the reason I haven't made it since then is because I really like that grain crust that we made on Monday. That's my favorite. So when I make pizza dough, I always go for that one. And you saw how we were able to freeze it, so I can make a big batch at a time, divide it, put it into jars or containers or bags, whatever you please, and freeze it. So it's not that I don't like this cauliflower crust. I do think it's quite good. I really like that one. I like the texture of it because it seems to be most like regular glutinous pizza crust. So you can decide what you prefer. If you're trying to stay away from starches altogether, then maybe this is one that you like. It doesn't have any, it has dairy in it, or eggs rather. Well, no, it has eggs and dairy. So if you're vegan, and I can tell you some ways to substitute here too, but you might, that might be a deciding factor. Yesterday we had a nut crust, so if there are nut allergies, you might not want to try that one. So there might be different reasons that you try the 3, which is exactly why I offer them. They're all gluten-free, but one, if you're avoiding, like I say, grains or starches, you may not want that one. If you don't like nuts, you're allergic, you don't want that one. This one, vegetable base, cool. Maybe this is the one for you. All right. So 2 pounds of cauliflower florets. So that the florets are just the white part on the cauliflower. I don't actually have, I have a cauliflower, but it's one of those, I call it the space cauliflower. I would pull it out, rifling through the fridge. Sorry, I didn't have this in hand. This is the, I forget what, we always called it space cauliflower. When I worked at farmers markets back in the early 2000s, it had sort of this futuristic look. I'm just pulling these leaves off of here. So if you remember, if the leaves look good, and these don't look great, we can use those leaves, we can cook them, we can slice them, make pesto or sauce or something out of them. But mine don't look fantastic. So I'm gonna peel those off. Give this a little rinse. So this is my space cauliflower. It's that green, I forget what they call this, Romanesco, I believe, is the type of cauliflower. So it is in fact cauliflower and not broccoli. It's got some little brown tips on it. It's been in the back of the fridge for a little bit, so that'll be first on the list of things to use. So anyway, you could use something wonderful like this for your pizza and give it a little extra color. So there's also purple cauliflower. There's that cheddar, it's called cheddar cauliflower, that's more of an orange color. The purple pigment in vegetables, which is the anthocyanin pigment, is not stable. It's not heat stable. So if you've ever had purple peppers or purple broccoli, purple green beans, purple beans, as soon as you cook those, that purple kind of dissipates and it's like a dull color. It's not that bright purple. So if you want to really appreciate those colors, you can either use those vegetables raw, or you can add acid when preparing them. So if you have a marinated salad where it's not totally crunchy raw, the vinegar, the acid has kind of broken down some of the, I don't want to say proteins in the vegetables, but it has broken down some of the cells in the vegetables to kind of soften them. So you can appreciate it in a way that's a little easier to digest, yet it's still raw and it may have that color. So that acid, when that comes into contact with anthocyanin pigment, it actually brightens it, almost makes it a reddish color. This is the case with red cabbage. That is a little bit of a different reddish, purplish pigment than in the beans or the cauliflower. But you get my point, is that this purple, you might use purple cauliflower, but you might not end up with a really cool like purple pizza crust. The yellow should hold its pigment a little bit more. That's the carotene pigment, and then the green, of course, is chlorophyll. We could have a whole session on food pigment, vegetable pigments. That was something I geeked out on in my food science classes in college. Anyway, so the green one could make a cool green cauliflower crust. All right, so Welcome you all today. Let's see here. So 2 pounds of cauliflower florets. You've seen by now that it doesn't take me long to get off onto a different tangent with recipe reading. 1 egg, that's a large egg, 1 egg beaten. So I've got my egg here. I'm gonna pre-whisk that before it goes in. 1/3 of a cup of soft goat cheese, which is also known as chef. If you don't have goat cheese, which I did not have today, in my larder, in my fridge, my cheese drawer, I'm using cream cheese or Neufchâtel. So that is a substitute that you could make, a substitution that you could make, okay? Or some kind of combination. You know, maybe you have, I don't know, maybe you have cottage cheese or a little bit of cream cheese or a little bit of goat cheese. So you can always, you know, kind of substitute. If you had cottage cheese, I would spin that in a food processor or a blender or something so that it is softer. That's a little bit more thin than your goat cheese or your cream cheese. So just know that the consistency might be a little bit different, but we do, you know, there are things that we can substitute if we don't have all of the exact ingredients. As I mentioned yesterday, even though this is something we're baking, it's not quite like, you know, making a cake where it is very scientific and you don't want to just go adding more flour or dumping in more baking soda. So we can take some liberties here. All right, after the goat cheese, we have 1 teaspoon of dried oregano or other herbs, other herb mixtures of your choosing. So something I pulled out of the pantry today, there is that oregano. I have dried parsley, dried thyme. This is a leek powder that I found that was in kind of the back there. That would certainly not be the same as like a, you know, green herby flavor, but it might be kind of interesting to put some leek powder in there. So I also have from our demo, this was a couple of weeks ago now when we did the low waste, no waste cooking class. We made this super seasoning mix, if you recall. This was where it ended up in this jar here, SOUPER seasoning. I have the world's worst masking tape right now, so it comes off in these, what does it say? Mix. It comes off in these weird pieces. So anyway, that is our super seasoning mix. So that was that. We took the carrots, the parsley, we had some, the green part of the leeks. We had, what else was in there? Dried tomatoes, fennel fronds. If you go back to the low waste, no waste cooking class and look, the recipe is there. So it has a ton of salt in it because this is essentially your seasoning. So it was a way to use a lot of those odds and ends that you might otherwise compost or throw away and make it into a seasoning. So I've been using this over the last couple of weeks. And, you know, you can take a little teaspoon out of it and add it to something. So, hey, Karen. So let's see, I used this to make some rice earlier this week. Just put a little teaspoon or 2 in while the rice was cooking. You can add it to soup. What else did we use that for? You could add it to a quiche. Any place where you're going to put salt anyway, and then you just get a little bit more of that herb mixture. So you might add this, if you have made this, you might add this to your pizza crust, okay? So again, just trying to cross-reference some of the other classes that we've had over the past weeks. And so the next ingredient in this recipe is a pinch of salt. So if you were adding that super seasoning mix, you wouldn't want to add any additional salt. So again, 2 pounds of cauliflower florets, 1 egg, that's a large egg beaten, 1/3 cup of goat cheese or, what did I say, cream cheese or some other combination of soft cheeses. You could even use mascarpone. So that is a soft, spreadable Italian cheese. It doesn't have a ton of flavor, but it might lend itself again more to a sweeter topping. So, you know, but that's an option. It's not like it's one of the things I always have in my par stock in my fridge, but I happened to have some a couple of weeks ago and I substituted it in a quiche instead of cream cheese or something. So whatever you have, you know, use what you've got. And hello, Molly, glad you're here. Okay, so, and then 1 teaspoon of those dried herbs. Okay, so again, I'll post these recipes by the end of the week and you'll have all of them. My oven is at 400 today. We've had various temperatures for these pizzas this week. So if you're trying to make them all at the same time, you're going to need one of those ranges that has a couple of different ovens in it. So to make the cauliflower rice is where we start. So I already have this part done because I wanted to expedite this a little bit. sort of the magic of television. I'll show you this in a moment. Let me empty this bag, which I meant to do before Sunday. So again, this will be a good point to talk about what you can freeze or not. Let me just grab another bowl here. Okay, so to make the cauliflower rice. So you're gonna take those cauliflower florets, whatever color you've chosen, and just put those, cut them up into, let's say, bite-sized pieces, or, whatever one little kind of floret looks like. Put those into, if you have a food processor, I know I've been talking a lot about the food processor. If you don't have one, that's fine. Just put your knife skills to work and make some very small minced pieces of cauliflower. You could try to do that in a blender. Again, I talked about a regular blender being more for liquids. If you have a Vitamix type of mixer, you could certainly put solids in there and have more success. Otherwise, a food processor is great, or just go to town with your knife skills. So we're gonna put the cauliflower florets in the food processor, or whatever you're doing, and chop them up until it's like a rice-like texture. Okay, so we're doing the chopping first. We're not cooking them and then ricing. I suppose you could. So this is an option if you don't have that food processor, and maybe you have a ricer, but you don't have a food processor. My ricer is in the basement because I don't use it much. I wish I had it to show you. But a ricer looks like a gigantic, here, we'll pretend that this is a ricer and I'm a giant. So this is my garlic press. And so a ricer would look just like this, but it's much bigger. Sometimes they're plastic, sometimes they're metal. And it's, you can use it for potatoes. You can use it, in this case, cauliflower has become a popular item to rice. You can also buy, now we can buy all sorts of things riced and pre-frozen, broccoli, cauliflower. They have those all made in the freezer section at stores. So anyway, you could pre-cook this cauliflower and then press it through a ricer, or you could chop it up then. So it really doesn't matter, I guess, what step you take first, I guess, depending on what tools you have, what you want to do first. You just need to make it cooked and in smaller pieces in some way. So I did mention those pre-made, pre-riced cauliflower or broccoli. So if you don't want to do this whole step with the cauliflower, you could buy that pre-made frozen riced cauliflower, and then just squeeze it out, as I'm going to show you in a minute. So if you want to just take away that initial step, that's totally fine. So I had cooked and riced this cauliflower a little while ago, meaning August, and I had it in my freezer. I'm finding all kinds of wonderful things in my freezer at this point, and I'm going to have all kinds of fresh food after this is over, so I'm just cleaning it out. So I found this, it lasted it's held up really well in the freezer. So what I did was I made a double batch of the cauliflower part of this, and because you may find that that's like the most tedious part. And then I froze it, and I labeled it, however many, it was one recipe of cauliflower pizza crust or whatever. So I know that I don't have to re-measure it. So keep it in a bowl because this may still be drippy. So it is, you can sort of see, it almost looks like rice. Okay, so once you have that, let's say that we are going to chop it up first, and then we're going to cook it. So once you have it chopped, then you're going to fill a large pot with an inch of water, or fill a pot with an inch of water, probably a bigger one is better, and bring that to a boil, and then add that rice and cover it and let it cook for 4 to 5 minutes. So again, you just want it to be cooked so this is not raw. If you're into raw pizza, I don't know, you could somehow find a way to make a cauliflower crust pizza with raw. That would be a whole different thing, because obviously we wouldn't put raw egg in there. You probably wouldn't put cheese, or this type of cheese. If you're raw, it would be something different. So that's a whole other class. Sounds interesting, but not what we're making today. So then once you've cooked that, we're going to drain it into a fine mesh strainer. So I have just a regular colander here, but I have lined it with cheesecloth. So if you have a great big linen towel that you don't mind, it's not going to get dirty, it's just going to get really wet. But if you don't mind using that, you could also try a great big towel. So just something where you don't have, it needs to be a fine enough weave that you don't have the cauliflower falling through. Right. So once I have that, that lined, or if you have a really fine mesh colander, I think they're a pain to clean, so this is going to be a lot easier. I have found that I can reuse cheesecloth if I rinse it really well. Still easier than cleaning a strainer. I won't even show you the strainers that I've used. So once you have just done a basic strain of that, then we're going to squeeze out this water, because the key to this crust is making this really, really dry. So I'm just going to squeeze as much liquid out of this as I can. I mean, you can really, twist this up and squeeze like crazy. This is one of those places, I suppose, where kids might have fun getting in here and, seeing who's the strongest and who can squeeze the most water out. And just when you think you've gotten every last drop, there's probably half a cup more. I don't think I shared my olive oil container I don't think I shared it on my business page, but somebody was asking me how I had mentioned something about getting all the olive oil out of a container, and so I did a little demo on how to do that last week, how I get every last drop. So this is not quite the same idea, but it's just something we don't want. So getting the water out of this. So squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. You could even let it hang for a while, like you might if you were straining fruit to make jelly. See what drips out. So I also talked in that low waste, no waste cooking class. It was on a Wednesday, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I'm not sure, but it should be labeled. Again, it should be archived and labeled in my videos. We talked about, there's this, at some point, somebody said, don't boil your vegetables because you'll cook all the nutrition, you'll lose all the nutrition. And I agree, those vitamins that are in vegetables are water soluble, so they will end up, leaching isn't the right word maybe, but being more in the cooking water. And so what I do in that case is then I save that cooking water. So maybe I'm going to cook broccoli or I'm going to cook spinach, but I'm going to save that cooking water and then I'm going to use it to put into a soup or something, or to cook rice or to cook beans. So that flavor and the nutrients is going to get into that food. Now, you may have heard me in that class reference the Tamar Adler book, An Everlasting Meal, which is one of my favorites. You could end up with a ton of little containers or big containers in your fridge that are just all these weird liquids. Yes, so you do have to do some management of cooking liquids if you are going to go that route. But my point is, there is a lot of nutrition in those cooking liquids. So this, we could use this cooking water. I don't know, there's like a half a cup here. You could put that into something. I'm going to save it for later. I'm making a potato soup at some point in the next day or two. And maybe I'll use that cauliflower that I just showed you. And so that would be a little dab of, cauliflower flavored water. I don't know. All right, so now I'm getting my actual mixing bowl. Put this back here so it doesn't end up getting dumped. And so I'm taking that cauliflower out of the cheesecloth or the strainer, whatever you have chosen to use. And it's nice and dry, a lot more dry. Okay? So don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you got all the liquid out of it. You don't have to put a brick on that or something. Although you could put a cast iron pan on top of it. I showed you that in the class when we marinated the tofu. We did that vinaigrettes, mayos, and marinades class, again, a few weeks ago. And I showed you how to press the water out of tofu using paper towels, or again, you could use cheesecloth and that cast iron pan or something. So if you wanted to, you could lay this cauliflower in that cheesecloth and somehow drain, with that weight on top of it. So different ideas, again, cross-pollinating with the other classes. This shows, I was thinking about this, it shows that these methods or these ways that I cook they seem to be very seamless. They all kind of intertwine. So I'm not suggesting that anybody subscribe to my cooking lifestyle, but it does seem they all kind of play off of each other, which is helpful. It makes things more efficient. All right, so I've got the rice in the bowl, and now I'm going to add all the other ingredients. So I've got my egg. I'm going to pre-beat the egg. So it mixes in a little bit better. And then I'm taking that cream cheese that I'm using, again, because I did not have goat cheese or chèvre. And you could use mascarpone, you could use, I was about to use some feta with the cream cheese. I was gonna whip it together, and then I realized I had enough cream cheese, so that will work today. Right, so I've got that. And then I've got my herbs. So I am gonna use some of that super seasoning that we made the other day. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon. Again, this has a lot of salt in it, so this is going to be my salt as well. I'm not going to add that additional salt that the recipe calls for. And it's a wonderful aroma. I think we added dried fennel because we didn't have the fennel frond, the fresh fennel fronds. It's like a tongue twister. So I'm smelling that fennel, which is really wonderful. Okay, and then I'm just going to get in here. Now, the recipe says that mixing by hand is the best, and I agree. Our hands are our best tool. I'm putting on some gloves. I suppose if you were doing this in your own home, you don't have to. I usually put on gloves if I'm, making meatloaf and I'm really kneading the ground meat. I don't want to get that like under my fingernails. So, but the hands are definitely the best tool. I fully agree. Unfortunately, at this point in time, I have lots of gloves on hand. So we're going to get in here. And I always think of, when I'm mixing anything by hand like this, whether it's a dough of some sort or meatloaf, this is kind of therapy for me. It's like a moving meditation. Hello, Sarah. Welcome. So nice to see some familiar names pop up on the screen there. Thank you for joining me today. They talked about rain today. I'm looking outside and I haven't seen anything more than a few droplets yet, but this is a good place to be on a cloudy day, is in your kitchen or wherever you are in your home. In my kitchen, learning about some new foods we can make. All right, so just basically trying to get this all incorporated, so it's like a homogeneous mixture here. So we don't see any big clumps of cream cheese or the herbs, just getting it nice and mixed there. So like we did yesterday with that almond crust, I'm going to shape this onto my baking pan. Okay, so let me put these things to the side. And I'm using the silicone baking mat like I had yesterday. So this is probably a larger pan than we're going to need, but it's here. My silicone baking mat, my Silpat, or this generic name is silicone baking mat, fits nicely onto this one, so it's not going to be slopping over the edge. So I like this big tray, but you could certainly use a smaller one. And so I'm going to spread on here, but I am going to spray first. So just a little bit of nonstick cooking spray, or again, as we said in that low waste, no waste cooking class a couple weeks ago, I saved the butter papers. If you do eat butter or some kind of plant-based solid fat that's wrapped in paper, you could use the papers from that to grease a pan or something. So just more ways to get every last bit out of our food. Okay, so I'm placing this onto my pan. And then I'm just going to shape it. And this one's a little bit more moist than the almond crust yesterday. That one we actually rolled out. This one, I suppose you could try if we put a piece of parchment on there. Is it a good idea for me to try something for the first time when I'm live and willing to give it a shot? More embarrassing things have happened in my life. Okay. So what we did with that almond crust yesterday is I took a glass I have a rolling pin, of course, but it's long, so it's not gonna fit on the pan. But we could roll this out if we wanted to be more of a consistent thickness. You could roll it out, and to heck with the perfectly even edges on a pizza. Like, make this look rustic if you want to. If you don't want to, you might want to be a little bit more precise, and that's cool. And we'll show you how to do that. So this is actually very helpful to do this rolling method here. And we'll see how this serves me. I didn't spray this paper before I laid it on top of here to roll. But this is good, again, to get that even thickness, and then we can shape it from there. Okay, and you know what? This pan is actually, I take that back. This pan is actually going to be maybe just about the right size. I'm noticing that part of this is a little thinner, so I'm rolling some over. The disadvantage of using this paper is you can't quite see how you're doing. So I'm gonna get a better view here. But then you could start to kind of bring it together with that. You know what? I'm gonna end up making this like a nice, beautiful rectangle anyway, because there is a part of me, there lives inside of me, a part that is, perhaps no surprise to some of you, perfectionist. And so I am going to, after all, make it look really nice and shaped. But you don't have to. You can make this in whatever shape you want. I was saying yesterday for Valentine's Day, we did like heart-shaped pizzas. It was kind of fun. So. And this is just fun too. I don't know. I could sit here and putz with this all day. It's just kind of therapeutic to. Wow, I'm breathing more deeply all of a sudden. Wow, cauliflower crust. It's like Zen. It's like Zen in your kitchen. All right. So again, we don't want this to get too thick. So as I'm bunching up those edges, and this doesn't have to be this putzy, but if you want to meditate on your cooking, then take some time. Take some deep breaths as you, if you've been to any of my yoga classes, we do pranayama, mindful breathing exercises. So we could bring some of those mindful breathing exercises into pizza crust making. Okay, so like I said, here I went and made it really nice and rectangular. I'm gonna go ahead and bake that. So I'm gonna throw this onto convection so that we can expedite this process a little bit. Hopefully that's not gonna be too loud for the rest of this demo. And how are we doing? We've got plenty of time to do the crust here, or the toppings. Okay. So if there are any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask. I see some of my yoga students here. Welcome. Oh, somebody asked yesterday, it was Sandy, I don't know if Sandy's back, but she said she wanted to know how that pizza turned out. That was the toppings that we did yesterday on the almond flour crust. Again, I'm using whatever I have in my fridge, and I'm getting pretty creative here. We did a red sauce. We did that sauteed kale, which we're going to do again today. Apple slices and dried apricots. That was sort of a surprise. Pardon me for a moment, I'm going to sneeze. Sneezed into my elbow, but we'll wash anyway. And then I had sliced provolone and feta cheese. So that was an interesting combination. The apricots were a delightful surprise topping. I'd never had dried apricots in a pizza, and I really liked the texture, almost sort of like if you had some meat on there, some sausage, that sort of chewy texture. So I recommend it. All right, so today we are going to do the last two pieces of my lacinato dinosaur kale here. Let's put a saute pan. And as I mentioned this week already, I took the stems off of the leaves. We'll cook those stems, but we'll use the stems, we're going to cook them separately because they're going to need a little bit of extra time since they're more tough. So we'll get those started. Basic knife skills demo is the very first one of this series. I forget if that was on the 23rd that we started these or what, but that's at the very beginning. We did those knife skills. All right, so I'm going to get the kale going. going to chop up the rest of this, but add it a little bit later in the cooking process. So I'm heating up my pan. When that pan is nice and hot, then I'm going to add the oil, get the oil nice and hot. So hot pan, then hot oil, less chance of things sticking to the pan. Okay, I'm going to use some grapeseed oil. It has a high smoke point, so it's not going to burn. Turn it up a bit. I'm also going to use, again, I decided on these toppings about an hour ago because it was what I had in my fridge. So this is like some sort of Iron Chef challenge here. So I have some scallions, some green onions. And I'm going to use, I don't know if I'll use all of these, but I am going to use both the green and white part. Okay. Okay, then I'm getting down to the little nubbins here. And I bet you can guess where those are going to go. Into that dish of, hey, there's Sandy. Into that bowl of scraps for my quick and dirty vegetable stock that I'm going to make. It's really not dirty, but it's the quick and dirty recipe. Okay, so Sandy made a kale soup last night. Excellent. And Sandy, I was just telling them that the apricots on that pizza yesterday turned out really nicely, so I recommend them. She was the one that asked how that was. Okay, so we've got our green onions, and then I'm going to use some, let's see, let me get this kale going before I get too excited about other ingredients, and then the smoke alarm goes off. So I have some cherry tomatoes or grape tomatoes, just a little bit more oblong. I'm just going to cut those in half. As I mentioned, I don't know if it was yesterday or whatever, I'm the type of person who likes to take some risks in the kitchen in terms of flavor combinations or trying new recipes. And so, you know, I'm kind of winging it with these ingredients. I'm like, what the heck? I like this, I like this, I like this. Why not put them together? Throwing up cheese on top, it's got to be good. So we will see. We don't know until we try, right? It's kind of like green eggs and ham. You might not know what you're missing. So to this, I'm just going to add a little bit of salt. Where's my salt? Okay. Or if you have any other favorite seasonings, you can put that on there. So I mentioned yesterday that there are a couple reasons that we're going to cook the kale. So that I can add a little bit more flavor with the oil or the seasonings, not so much with the oil, but with the salt and the pepper, whatever you're adding. But also, if it has a chance to be coated with that oil during sauteing, there's less chance that it's going to burn when it's baking. So if you have that dry, raw kale on the pizza, putting it into the oven raw, there's a chance that it could burn. So maybe you like that little crispy edges, that's fine. But this is a way to keep it a little bit more moist. So I'm done cooking this. I was just doing that to give it a little bit of, just to cook it a little bit, just to soften it. This will cook down a little bit more, you know, as we bake it. So I just wanted to get it started. I'm not cooking the heck out of it. So I've got my tomatoes. I'm gonna cut the rest of these because I know that that's a larger crust than we thought we might have. So just cutting those down the center. And again, I'm learning to scroll up to see comments. Okay. I also have, so I've got red sauce. I'm going to use that today again. I have some grated mozzarella, shredded mozzarella, part skim. And then I have some garlic dill cheese curds that I also found in the fridge. So I thought, okay, cool, why not try that? Garlic sounds good. Add it to the onions and tomatoes. The dill is not too pronounced. I'm going to cut these up a little bit just so that we're not putting these huge globs all in one place. But I thought that would be kind of a fun addition. So it really is fun to kind of surf the fridge and see what toppings we might come up with. I mean, if you have favorites, of course, procure them as you can these days. But it's been a lot of fun to use whatever ingredients I have, since I'm not going out to the grocery store as often right now with this social distancing and all that sort of thing. So cheese curds on your pizza. Maybe some of you have tried that and this is not new. All right, so I got those broken down well enough. So with this pizza that we're baking, so the recipe recommends about 1/3 of an inch thick, which you can do it however thick you like, but that coincides with the baking time. So I definitely recommend that you pre-bake this crust. We did that with the other two this week. I like my crust to be a little bit more crispy. With that almond crust, pre-baking it helps to get that center, give that center a chance to get more crisp before we put those toppings on and start putting more moisture on there. And so again, I do recommend pre-baking this. So the total baking time, actually it recommends baking it 35 to 40 minutes before you even put toppings on, and then just finishing it off 10 to 15 minutes, basically just to melt that cheese, like I mentioned. So I put this on convection. We're going to see where this is at. How much time do I have? All right. I'm going to let this go for a little bit longer. The edges are starting to get brown, but I want to make sure that it's not going to be totally soft in the center. All right, so while we're letting that cook a bit more, are there any questions that anyone has, or things you want to know, favorite topping combinations you want to tell me about? Just looking at this here. Hello. All right, cool. So once again, I'll run through the recipe here. This is the cauliflower crust pizza. Serves 2 to 4. I don't know, you saw how big that was. Yeah, it's 2 to 4. I could definitely split that with somebody, but if it was, if you had other things that you were also eating with your pizza, definitely more would go farther. Excuse me while I answer the phone and then hang it up. Okay. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I still have a landline, which surprises a lot of people, but I have not figured out how to turn it off, just short of taking it off the hook. But I've had some challenges as I'm teaching in my home where the phone is ringing, so I've been extremely rude to many people lately and have had to call back apologizing. So 2 pounds of cauliflower florets, whatever color cauliflower excites you. 1 large egg beaten. 1/3 cup of soft goat cheese or cream cheese or some other kind of soft cheese, mascarpone could work. 1 teaspoon of dried oregano or other herbs of your choice. You could put tarragon in there, parsley, marjoram, whatever you like. You could try fresh herbs. As we discussed, dried herbs are usually twice as concentrated as dried. So if you're putting in fresh herbs, you might add more. They would have more moisture, so that could, if you're adding them in large quantities, certainly affect the moisture that's in this crust. But again, we can take some liberties and try, make copious notes on your recipe, so that if you do it again, if you try to replicate, you know where to make those changes. And then a pinch of salt. So if you're using that super seasoning that we made, you don't have to add that additional salt. Oven is at 400. We would make that cauliflower rice first by grinding up that cauliflower until it's in little rice-shaped pieces in a food processor by hand, however you prefer to do it. Then we're going to cook it in a pot of water, covered with water. Cook it just for a few minutes. Drain it into a fine mesh strainer, and don't worry if you're trying to scribble this down. I'm going to have these recipes on my page by the end of the week. Drain that, wrap it in a linen dish. It doesn't have to be linen. Some kind of a dish towel, cotton dish towel, some kind of a dish towel or cheesecloth where the grains of the cauliflower are not going to get through, so something with a tight weave. But that's not so thick. Like, I wouldn't use this to do it necessarily, but something that is, like I say, a cotton or linen dish towel or cheesecloth. And squeeze out as much moisture as you can, so you have that part, that moisture out of the recipe. And then we're going to mix that cauliflower with the egg, the goat cheese, or whatever cheese you picked, and your herbs, and then mixing by hand. I had gloves on. That helps. That works best. Spread it out on the baking sheet. You could make it round. You could make it zigzag. You could make it in a triangle. Whatever you want. Again, whatever is fun. If you have little ones involved, maybe they want to come up with some cool ideas, or just play. Adults can play and have fun being a little bit more spontaneous and random too. All right, let's chat this crust. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to unplug or I'm going to take my smoke alarm down just in case. Okay, it's that easy. I just don't trust myself. This could end up being like the Dan Aykroyd skit from Saturday Night Live where he's Julia Child and everything's just going sideways. I don't want that to happen. All right, so we have our beautiful crust here. And it's starting to get a little bit brown. Nice big brown piece in the middle there, so you can see that. And I'm going to go ahead and decorate that. So let me rearrange some things here so we can make space and you can see this pizza front and center. I have this wonderful little island here, this modular table that I can move around. This does not live here, but I can move it around, so it gives me a nice place to place my laptop and show you. So I'm grateful that I have this extra landing space today. Let's get our sauce. We just have a red sauce. It was a plain tomato sauce. I put salt, a little bit of dried oregano and basil, some garlic, granulated garlic. You could certainly use fresh garlic, and some red pepper flakes. I'm actually going to empty this. And we'll spread it out. You could use whatever kind of sauce you want. If you want to do a white sauce, a garlic sauce, just olive oil, whatever you like. Using that offset spatula that I talked about yesterday, one of my favorite kitchen tools. It's from my pastry days, but it certainly works for many other things. Spreading out that sauce. And then we'll start decorating. So we've got our kale. Start spreading that out on the pizza. Again, I think hands are the best tool. So that's what I'm choosing. So we have plenty of kale here. We made that bunch of kale go far enough for 3 pizzas this week. That's exciting. And then I've got my tomatoes. Spread those out here. And my scallions or green onions. You could use wonderful spring onions. We have soon, hopefully, ramps or wild leeks that we might find if you are a wild forager. Those I talked about in the pesto class, making a pesto with the leaves of the ramps. And so if you are into that, into alliums, that would be a delicious thing to put on some pizza. And then I've got my cheese curds. I'm going to put the mozzarella on last because I think I have way more than I need. So I want to add these cheese curds that we so carefully chopped. And then lastly, just a little bit of extra mozzarella. I mean, I could eat cheese for days, so this is still maybe not going to be enough, but we need to be more conservative with our resources these days, right? So let's just leave it at that. I did miss a spot, but I'm just gonna. So I'm putting that in, and so that is it for getting that pizza ready. So we'll let that go for a little bit and then see how that looks. So let me see what questions you have. Sandy says pesto. I don't know if that's in reference to toppings you could put on the pizza, but yes, absolutely. One of my favorite combinations is like a bacon pesto feta, I want to say, is really good. Hello, Christine. I'm so glad you're here. And what other questions do you have? What other items would you like to know? Comments, questions about ingredients, about technique, about the other two gluten-free pizza classes. Sandy, you want to know instead of sauce, is that, I'm assuming that's what you're asking. So instead of sauce, you could, like I said, you could use a red sauce or a white sauce. I have made pizzas where it was almost like a focaccia, where I just put like a lot of olive oil and then put the toppings on there. I still did cheese or I did vegetables, that sort of thing, but I didn't have sauce. So my olive oil was kind of like my sauce. Oh, you're saying the pesto for the sauce. Yes, of course. You could put pesto in place of the sauce. You know what, that's what I should do. I've got like jars and upon jars of pesto in my freezer, not just from the class that I taught that last week, but it's one of those things that I use or that I go to when I need to use a lot of herbs, and so it's quite extensive. So thank you for that idea. I may start using pesto as a sauce in lieu of tomato sauce for pizza. I appreciate that idea. All right. So I mentioned too in this recipe that if you don't want to go through the process of preparing that cauliflower, so we had to first chop it up, and then we cooked it, and then we squeezed out all the water. You could also cook it first, then chop it up, and then squeeze out the water. You can interchange those first two. If you don't want to go through that process, you can purchase pre-made riced cauliflower or even riced broccoli I've seen at different natural food stores. So you could do a combination of cauliflower broccoli crust, or you could use the same technique to make just a broccoli crust, or any, brassicas. Kale is in that same family. So I suppose you could use any of those. And, really the cauliflower is here for the look of the white crust. So if you wanted to, you could add other vegetables. I mean, I haven't tried making, let's say a carrot crust or a squash crust, but I suppose you could use a lot of different vegetables and substitute them for that cauliflower in this recipe. I am making this up right now as I go. I've never thought about this. You've all given me ideas, or you've gotten my thought process going. So yeah, why couldn't we try using other vegetables in this recipe, as long as it doesn't end up being too much of a paste that we're spreading. So I'm thinking of, like, if you're cooking squash, I wouldn't cook it so much that it's like a paste, because you do want some kind of a texture to this crust. So cooking it like, al dente, to the tooth, so there's some, not crunch to it, but some texture that's not just, mush, or this is my symbol for mush. Something that's, or this mush, so that it has some texture to it, because we're still going to add the eggs, we're still going to add that cheese, which are what is binding that dough. Like yesterday with the almond crust, we had the egg in there, we had Parmesan cheese. Those were both the binding mechanisms in that recipe. So as long as you still have those, I don't see why you couldn't use other types of vegetables or combinations. So again, as you've no doubt seen in my cooking over the last month or so, I like to focus a lot on vegetables. It's not just simply plant-based diet, but I love vegetables, and I try to get them in at every turn. So to have a pizza crust that's completely vegetable, with the addition of the cheese and egg, but I mean like the base of it is vegetables, that is very exciting to me. So we could try that. All right, so I know we're just trying to brown this crust. We've got about 5 more minutes. I'm gonna put this on broil for a tiny bit. Hopefully we're not gonna burn the place down. Could start singing a Talking Heads song here. What questions do you have? What else do you want to know? No other classes this week, just so you know. These 3 classes, the 3-part pizza, gluten-free pizza crust, were our cooking classes for the week. Real quick plug for yoga as we wait a couple more minutes for this pizza to be done. Tonight, 7:30 to 8:15, we have a candlelight yoga class in my home studio. So that'll be a 45-minute class. So join me for that if you wish. And then tomorrow morning, we have a 9 o'clock yoga class as well. There are 2 yoga classes tomorrow. All of my yoga classes are also listed on my MP Facebook page, so check those out. Those are recurring events each week until further notice. I have not yet set the cooking classes for next week. There will be cooking classes, but I have not yet sat down to determine what they will be. So as I mentioned earlier in this week, if you have ideas, or if there's a topic that we already explored, but you want to go deeper. So we did like the part 1 and part 2 of culinary knife skills. We did the sharpening and cutting, or so we did the cutting part of it one day, and then we did the sharpening part another day. We did food preservation 101, kind of an overview, and then we did 102, where we did the actual canning process. And then we did a step 3 where we did refrigerator preserves. So if there's some topic that I have already addressed and it seems like there might be a deeper level of that, let me know if there's something else you want to explore. The limitation right now is that, I don't necessarily have access to all of the ingredients. I don't tend to do a lot of animal-based, meat-based classes, so that's not something I'm particularly interested in bringing to you. If 25 people said they wanted to, learn how to make something, as long as you're not asking me to break down a side of beef, because I don't think that would be easy for me to procure right now. We could do that. So just let me know. Give me your ideas. All right. Ooh. This one might be the prettiest yet. It's got a lot of little wonderful freckles of cheese. Ooh, I love it. So that is our cauliflower crust pizza. All right, so again, we had kale. It was that lacinato dinosaur kale that we sauteed. Green onions, fresh tomatoes. We had garlic dill cheese curds, and we had that part skim shredded mozzarella. So that will be an interesting combination. I'll let you know how it goes. I really wish that you all could be here to share this with me. It's been a lot of pizza for me to eat this week, but it's good. Okay. Yeah, so all of the other videos from past classes are all archived. If you have a moment to go through and there's something you want to know more about, please let me know and we can dig a little bit deeper. You're always welcome to ask me questions in reference to some of those archived demos. We can always go back and I'm very happy to explain something to you better. Talk about ingredients, where did you get your potato starch or your tapioca flour or whatever? Where did you get your canning jars or something? So let me know. I'm happy to share that information. So again, we'll figure out what cooking classes we're going to do next week. I do like teaching gluten-free baking classes, so maybe we'll do something along those lines again. There seems to have been some interest between the pantry stocking class a couple weeks ago and this series this week. So again, let me know. Otherwise, hopefully I will see you this evening for yoga or sometime later this week. We still have a couple more. We still have 4 yoga classes this week. No other cooking classes, but we do have a few yoga classes. So again, I thank you for coming. I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rain. Maybe you're inside cooking and heating up your kitchen and you're feeling toasty. So enjoy it, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.